Hey guys, Youngblood with you, and today I wanted to do another picking the right ship video, this time regarding picking the right scout ship. Now I'd like to thank Dark God Master because this video is another user suggestion, and I appreciate those, because coming up with topics to talk about in these videos can be like half the battle when it comes to actually pumping out content. So if any of you guys have any videos you want to see, I'm always open to suggestions, so just drop them in the comments. So in this video, we're talking about scout ships, and I think that's going to be a wide open category because there's a lot that can actually do it since there's a couple different approaches to scouting. Now the overall goal of the scout though is to get out in front of the fleet and try to see how things look, and we're mostly going to be checking for different threats. Now I'm going to say that in peaceful areas or times, a scout could be a utility piece for an exploration or a mining fleet to try and go out and find resources and other potential new things for the bigger ships to travel to. But here in this video, we're going to focus on finding out if the next sector, that next stop, is going to be safe. So let's follow our semi-standardized approach to this point, starting cheap and working our way up. And in the starting lines, I think there's two that make the most sense, and that would be the Mustang Beta and the Aurora LX. Now, if you're up to speed on these ships, you're going to notice that both of them are actually exploration variants, and both come stocked with jump engines. Having a jump drive is almost a requirement for any scout, as they're going to need to be able to jump ahead of the fleet and report back if the next sector is actually clear or safe enough for the rest of the fleet to then move in. Keep in mind though that all ships outside of the snub-nosed ships are going to be capable of equipping a jump drive. So while this doesn't really cross much off the list, it does come with the benefit of being able to fulfill that role from day one. That being said, both of these ships have factors that make them good fits to kind of lead the fleet at a low price. For the LX, the brochure goes on to talk about how the jump engine integrates with the navigation system, allowing you to store and share that information. So it's possible to jump in, bring that information back to the fleet to make sure the rest have an easier flight. I think that's pretty limited benefit, though, in this role, and the Mustang's claimed unprecedented range, talked about it in the description, along with the better top speed and slightly better I don't know. I think those things in general, though, make a better score. You know, it's a better ship for when we start choosing between these starter options. I think most scouts are probably going to want to avoid combat. So even though the Aurora may last longer if it gets into trouble with its proven durability, it has less of an ability to escape because it doesn't have the speed and agility that the Mustang Beta has. Past that, if you're wanting to upgrade the sensors on any of these ships, you're going to only help improve your odds and your skills as a scout. I think the Reliant makes an interesting option for scouting as well. But again, we're limited by the information that we don't have. It should be pretty fast and it should be pretty agile, but as far as the sensors, range, and speed go, we don't really know. I would assume with this, with the ship boasting alien technology, it should have advanced equipment that would make it a good choice. And I think it's going to be, I don't know, it's really built well to be a very versatile ship overall. So it's worth keeping an eye on, but it's hard to say for sure that it's going to be great with scouting in mind. The release that we got in the first Q&A talked about how its goals include research and reporting using sensors. So to me, that at least suggests a decent scout. And to take it a step further, they discussed the news van variant of the Reliant. And if you think about what that could entail, I think it means an ability to transmit information and the information that you've then also gathered. If you're talking about getting ahead of a fleet and being able to transmit data back to the rest, I can't help but feel like a news van version of the Reliant could be a really, really good option. Now, as we continue to move up in price, we're going to get to the 300 series and the Avenger. And in looking at these ships, I think any of the 300s could really do a good job at being a scout. So starting cheaper with the 300 and equipping it specifically towards being a scout by balancing out weapons and sensors, you could find a great ship. But if there was just one for me to recommend, it's probably going to be the 315. Not only does the 315 have what's described as power plants and engines designed for efficiency, it can also drop that tractor beam for a better forward-facing weapon or potentially adding additional scanning software. The 315 is fast, it's agile, it's damn good looking, and with the exploration capabilities built into the ship, it could easily be the tip of the spear heading into a sector for monitoring. It's also possible that if efficiency is the key to long range, that could also put off less of a signature. And that makes sense to me, but it may not end up being the case, but it could mean that you stay off the radar longer while being able to see those that aren't able to see you. Another alternative to bring would be the 325A, which certainly has improved durability and weaponry without sacrificing too many benefits on the 315, though it does lose you the stock jump drive. I think choosing between these two comes down to your primary goal and where you think you're going to be going, and what you're going to be facing in that zone. If you're taking dangerous territory on your trip, you're probably going to appreciate the 325 and its ability to give you that durability and the additional weaponry. If you're able to kind of create a hybrid between the 315 and the 325 through your own customization, you're probably going to find the best middle ground. The Avenger pretty much always gets a recommendation, regardless of the video that we're making, but I think as far as scouts are concerned, it finds a nice home here as well. Good weaponry, and with the looming release of the Warlock electronic warfare variant, you can easily have a ship that's capable of getting out in front and holding its own. Until that Warlock is actually released, though, I actually prefer the 300 series over the Avenger for this very specific role. However, if you want to do other things in the persistent universe other than scouting, you're probably better off with the Avenger in general, and it should perform well enough in a scouting situation. Before we get too much further into this topic, there is a category of ships that I think, in theory, could be outstanding scout ships, and that's racers. The reason I say could be is that I have concerns about range on ships like racers. They're designed for, as much performance and power as possible, and none of them are large ships, so fuel consumption could be a problem in the persistent universe on a ship that's not built to carry a ton of fuel, especially when we're talking about long journeys. So whether we're talking about the M50, the 350, or the Mustang Omega, or the Gamma, they're all going to do really well to jump in, fly quickly, establish threats, and get the hell out of Dodge. The Scout isn't designed to go into a sector and eliminate threats. It's designed to access them and get them back, that information back to the commanders waiting behind to use that information to plan their next move. So in that regard, I think the racers are an outstanding option. However, unless you have a carrier or maybe a Starfarer to refuel your racers, I think they're going to find a fairly limited utility in smaller fleets and may only end up being capable of a very limited number of jumps. I'm hoping we get more information about that as we go forward, but for those of you with racers already, this could be a great secondary role for those ships depending on the situation. I think the Gladius is another ship that, depending on the length of the trip, could be limited by its quote-unquote short-range patrol fighter designation. I get the impression it's going to have a bit more endurance than the racers, and with it being a legacy ship with older technology, the sensors it could equip could potentially be limited as well. That being said, the Gladius is fast, agile, it's a capable fighter that could get this job done. I don't think it's a perfect fit, but it's certainly not a bad one either. Stealth is another factor that can make for a good scout, primarily because you can get into the new sector, keep your signature low, and hopefully identify any threats that are out there, or maybe even potential targets before they even see you. So being invisible is always going to be better than being fast or powerful when the primary goal is to report and return. The ships we know that have those stealth aspects are going to be the Mustang Delta, the Aegis Saber, and the Hornet Ghost. And really, any of these ships could perform as a scout well, but I think the advantage has to go to the Saber. It should be the fastest of all three of these. It was purpose-built with stealth in mind, and you also come with a stock jump drive. And you've heard me talk about how nasty the Saber is overall, so in case it does get detected, it's more capable of dealing out damage and coming home to the fleet for repairs based on the redundant systems it has on board. It's not known to be a super durable ship. There's not a ton of shields and armor on it, but the redundancies do help in that regard. Now, I know that it's the most expensive of the three, but as long as you're being conscious of your signature output, you could really use any of these three effectively to scan and get away before they know you were even there. Before the Delta and the Ghost, or between the Delta and the Ghost, I think the Ghost is a better bet when it comes to staying off radar for longer and surviving attacks longer. But the Delta is more maneuverable and considerably faster if it comes time to turn and run. It kind of just depends on your player preference in that regard. The next group of ships that I think are going to make for really, really good scouts are actually some of my favorites for this role, and they are the dedicated info runners and electronic warfare ships. So in this group, we're looking at the Drake Herald, the Vanguard Sentinel, and the Hornet Tracker. Now, we'll eventually add the Avenger Warlock to this group, but we need more information on the Avenger variants prior to doing that. Now, all of these ships, though, have something in common that makes them ideal in my eyes, and that's their powerful sensors and broadcasting equipment. I envision all of these ships being able to jump into a sector, scan effectively for targets, and then be able to send that information back to the fleet through the jump point. Now, and depending on how jump points work, you may be able to do this more effectively using an electronic warfare ship than others where you may have to jump back through to relay that information, which will then waste fuel just to update the rest of the fleet. Now, the fiction regarding the Vega system mentioned the comm arrays that can relay the information and try not to overload them by reaching out to family members that are in distress. But depending on where you're traveling and if the enemies can block signals, it may be hard to use them. So either way, we're looking at ships that have an ability to take in a lot of information, and if they're pestered, they may be able to disable enemy ships long enough for support to come in and help you, or for you to turn and run away. The Herald may be my favorite ship in this group based on its unassuming primary role and its just crazy large engines for its size. It's a ship that I haven't been able to recommend a whole lot, but I am a huge fan of the ship and I think it fits perfectly here. Between the Tracker and the Sentinel, we need more information, but the cost difference is pretty drastic, so I think either can perform well. The key differences between them, though, are going to be that the Vanguard is designed with long range in mind, so the requirement of bringing, like a refueler along is going to be a little bit lower, and the Vanguard is fast. The Vanguard also comes with those redundant systems that we've talked about before, which is going to help it stay alive longer if it ends up being engaged. But the Hornet is also pretty durable. If you can swing it, the Sentinel is probably a better choice in my mind than the Hornet, but all three of these ships are going to be really, really good options as scouts, and probably a hell of a lot of fun to use. So the ships mentioned, right here, or to this point, I guess, have been where I'm really putting my money on for scouts. If I have to recommend you to get something in a scouting role, those are the ones. Now, there are ones that I think are larger that can absolutely do the job, but if you're looking to limit the risk, running a smaller ship through first is obviously the smarter move. You could send a Carrack through if you want as a scout, and I'm sure it would do fine, but what happens if there's a huge force on the other side? You've got a really expensive ship that could potentially face a lot of damage at that point. Now, you can also take a brute force approach to sending a Redeemer or an Andromeda or a Phoenix or even a Vanguard Warden or a Harbinger, which should all be able to do the job well enough. But they're going to be causing larger alarm on the enemy ships, and none of them are going to likely be very quiet when it comes to the radar. They could all get the information or start the fight or cause distractions or at least fight their way back to the point of jumping out, but that isn't the ideal situation for a scout. Not to mention, when we're talking about constellations and their snub-nosed fighters, if they don't dock before you need to leave, they're likely going to be left behind, and that sucks for the pilot of the snub-nose, and it also sucks for the owner of the ship. Someone's going to die, and someone's losing an asset. Both are bad. I think the last thing that I would suggest for you, those of you that want to add scouts to your fleet, especially like commanders of smaller fleets, would be the element of the unexpected, or kind of that wolf in sheep's clothing approach. Something like a Freelancer Dur isn't exactly a combat ship, so one jumping in and flying around could be an outstanding guise for a scout, as they're typically doing that job in an exploration role anyways. Add to that the sensor suites it comes on board with, and what could be decent speed, and it could be a good ship to kind of look and scout ahead. Another could be the Cutlass Red, which probably isn't going to scare many people, and they may think it's even a friendly force coming in to help with medical relief if something was going on. I mean, hell, a Cutlass Red may be even able to just fly right up to the group of enemy ships, ask if anybody needs assistance, and then casually fly away while twirling a cane, and nobody may blink an eye. That'd be a nasty trick for you pirates out there to consider. But finally, I would say something like an Aurora MR or a Mustang Alpha, the true starter ships. A lonely starter ship flying around isn't going to be a big payday for pirates, and at best is going to be casually observed. I mean, most people aren't going to care. Oh, hell, I can't believe I almost forgot this ship. The GN Scout, or the Cartual. I mean, it's a ship that should be more than capable of being a scout. It's even in the name, GN Scout. It's got alien technology. It is nimble. It's going to be fast. I think 270 was the speed that I saw out there. It's going to probably have good sensors on board with it. I mean, it gives you really just about everything that you want for a scout. It's even really kind of purpose-built for that. It's, more of a light fighter, giving you the ability to swarm targets if you have to, but the overall goal is going to be to avoid fighting. So while I think, in reality, it's going to end up being more along the lines of something like a Gladius or a Saber, something that's really designed to be more of a nimble dogfighter, it does open up the possibility, and I think it probably finds a nice middle ground between something like a racer and something like a light fighter, making it really pretty ideal for a scouting role. I cannot believe I almost forgot that ship. So there's a lot of different approaches to scouting, but I think the three main keys are stealth, sensors, and speed. So above, those are kind of my recommendations, the ships that we've already talked about. I'd love to know what you have. Anything could make a good scout, but obviously some are better than others, and I'd like to know what you think. Now keep in mind, saying something like a whole E, yeah, that could obviously work, but the larger you go, the more risk you're taking on, especially without much protection. So put them in the comments. Let me know what you guys are thinking, and I'd love to see where your head's at. Other than that, that's it for now. I appreciate you guys watching. Have yourselves a wonderful day, and take care.